Welcome to Abstract University. This module will cover a topic called brain trumps. To complete the module, when written content appears on a screen, please press pause, take time to absorb it, and then press play again when you're ready to move on. Simply put, retention through repetition is by far the best way to remember something, but you can't repeat the same thing 4 or 5 times in a presentation or a meeting without putting people to sleep. Brain trumps are ways to force the brain to revisit content without having to say it over and over again. There may be 3 or 4 at most key takeaways in every presentation or meeting. Naturally, based on how many times you've met, who you're meeting with, and what their interests are, those key takeaways are going to change. But it really boils down to having no more than 4 very important things you want to ensure people remember from your engagement. Results have been tested at the University of Kentucky. In fact, over 95% of the time when trumps are used, they force participants to remember exactly what the presenter wanted them to take away. Correctly using trumps takes both intent and practice, so expect to feel a little awkward at first. But if you want to take your game to the next level, this is one of the best ways to do it. The first trump, movement trump sitting, is the hardest to execute, especially over the phone, but it can be done if you plan it. I normally start my meetings asking participants if it's more important for them to remember everything we discuss or to remember a minimum of 3 or 4 key factors that they'll use in making their decision. I've never had anyone tell me they wanted to remember everything. At that point, I tell them that we're going to be doing a couple of things throughout the meeting that are scientifically proven to increase what people retain from this discussion. So to use this, if you're presenting a live platform, you can ask people to move chairs to change the person who's working the keyboard. The easiest way I've done it is to simply ask people to stand up for a minute and get energized, stretch, take a bio break, get a water. Anything that gets them up out of their chair and moving is going to increase the amount of oxygen that gets to their brain. The more oxygen that gets to the brain, the more people will retain. The second trump is talking trumps listening, and this is a great example of how to get the brain to revisit content at the same time increasing engagement from your participants. Instead of actively or inactively listening, it can only take a millisecond, but people have to think about what they're going to say before they say it. So they think about the content, they speak it, and they hear it all at the same time. Instead of just hearing, your audience engages 3 different parts of the brain to visit the content. So think about how you can get people to talk instead of listen. The third trump is images trump words. There are many ways to use images instead of words. Obviously, one way is to show an image as we have on the slide. When hosting a webinar, instead of confirming what people see by saying, "Do you see the cleansing phase on your screen?" increase their engagement and retention on very specific slides by asking people, "What's on your screen?" Even though it's a subtle change in how you ask the question, it's a big change in how you're forcing the participant to engage with you. They have to stop everything they're doing and view the screen, take a second to think about it and verbally tell you what they see, and naturally they hear themselves say it. So you're forcing 4 different parts of the brain to engage right around the content that you have decided is a key takeaway in your presentation or meeting. So what do you do if you don't have a physical image to show as we do on the screen? You can still have the participant paint an image. Typically, a question would sound like, "I know that our AC unit goes out when it's 100 plus degrees. What was it like the last time your air conditioning unit went out?" You're literally getting that participant to paint an image of an experience they had, a great reference point to a follow-up conversation. I bet it didn't take more than a few seconds to figure out what that previous slide was talking about once you saw this image. So think about it for a minute. The brain prefers images over words. They evoke emotion, long-term memory, and create a very quick link back to content. So the next trump is writing trumps reading, and it's absolutely the strongest of the trumps. Try this. Grab a pen and paper and write the word read without thinking about it in any way, shape, or form. It can't be done. Our brains just aren't wired like that. Writing trumps reading is literally retention cement and the strongest of the trumps. Naturally, you can't have people write down everything you're going to say, so be selective with this trump and definitely use it on the main takeaway of your presentation, especially if it involves numbers. The best way to execute it is to get people to write down the numbers at the beginning of your presentation. It should sound something like, grab a pen and paper, please write down 1,200 and then write down 60. Those are two things that are very important, and I want to make sure we cover them. 5, 10, 15 minutes later, right before you're ready to discuss the content behind those numbers, ask the participants, what's that first number I had you write down? 1,200, and then explain what it refers to. And then what was the second number and explain what that refers to. Think about how many times we've really forced engagement around that key takeaway. At the beginning of the presentation, we said it so our participant heard it, they wrote it down, they saw it. Later in the presentation, they saw it again, and they verbalized it. So that's 5 different times that you forced participants to revisit your number one takeaway. Trump number 5 is shorter trumps longer, and it's also the most misunderstood trump. Many people view it as they need to either shorten their presentation or cover less content, but that's not what this trump is about. People simply retain more when content is presented in smaller chunks. The television industry actually figured this out a long time ago, and that's why you will not see a television show go longer than 8 minutes without a commercial break. There are several great benefits to chunking your content. It'll keep participants alert and stay engaged, and when you purposely chunk your presentation and delivery, you tend to take out the fluff and the nice-to-know information. Do this by establishing an agenda for your engagement and emphasize when you move from one part of the presentation to another. And the last one is different trumps same. This does not apply to marketing campaigns. Typically in marketing, a consistent message is beneficial, but only if that message is used long enough to brand a company in a market. Think of some of the national campaigns that have established a consistent message, and you recognize the company the instant you hear their jingle or their statement. But when it comes to retention, people get bored very quickly with content they're familiar with. This affects salespeople specifically when you're working in an environment where there are multiple people involved in the decision process and multiple presentations. What happens is you host the first presentation, the prospect liked what they saw and heard, and now they take your presentation up the company ladder and invite another associate. So essentially you have an internal champion. If you do the second presentation the exact same way as you did the first, you will lose your internal champion. They've already heard what you're going to say, they get familiar with it very quickly, and then check out, often leaving the new individual alone to make the decision. So to recap, there are 6 trumps that will increase retention when you plan and use them properly. Movement trumps sitting, talking trumps reading, images trump words, writing trumps reading, different trumps same, and shorter trumps longer. The last 3 sides of this module are the reference material used to create it. Thanks for taking the time to watch this module. Have a great day.